Hi, friends. Welcome back. All right, it's your host, Lauren. We're on Desire Dialogues. Today, we're talking about a solo journey through sexuality. So, I really want to focus today on embracing the full spectrum of sexuality. So, hey, welcome to Desire Dialogues podcast, where we're going to explore all the complexities of identity, relationships, and everything in between. So, I'm going to solo deep dive into one of the most fascinating and often misunderstood aspects of who we are, which is sexuality. So now, like sexuality, like so many other things in life, doesn't really fit into a single box, right? It's not something easily defined and like necessarily easily pinned down either. And while we tend to hear a lot about labels and categories when it comes to sexuality, I want to explore today kind of why understanding sexuality as a spectrum can be a game changer. Not really only for how we understand ourselves, but also how we navigate the world and connect with others. All right, my friends, let's start by getting clear on the basics. So, for many of us, when we think about sexuality, we kind of immediately think about the idea of sexual attraction. For example, who we feel drawn to in a physical or emotional sense. And this is where we often get stuck in thinking, like, okay, there's only one way to experience that, right? Society can kind of tend to narrow that down to like two choices: heterosexual or homosexual. Here's the thing, folks, hell no, sexuality is far more diverse than that. So let's break it down a bit. So if we look at, the traditional framework, we have heterosexuality, right? That's the attraction between men and women, right? And then there's homosexuality, where someone is attracted to someone of the same gender. And these are those terms we're pretty familiar with, but those are just the surface. So, what happens when someone doesn't really fit into either of those categories? And what happens if their attraction is more fluid, a bit more nuanced? How about bisexuality? So, bisexuality is a term that describes people who are attracted to both men and women, or more broadly, to multiple genders. So, here's a catch though, like being bisexual doesn't mean someone is attracted to men and women in equal measure, right? Nor does it mean they have to be in a relationship with both genders at the same time. It's just a recognition, really, that that gender doesn't necessarily limit who they're attracted to. So that's just one piece of the puzzle. And there can also be bisexuality where it's like, okay, I'm a female, right? I'm a woman. I am bisexual, but I am more male leading. So here's the deal. Let's also talk about, very importantly, asexuality. When we hear the term asexual, many people kind of automatically assume that means lack of any kind of romantic or sexual desire, and it's absolutely more specific than that. So, asexuality refers to someone who does not experience sexual attraction, but that doesn't mean they don't feel love, affection, or desire to even have intimate connection. So, that's like a myth we can bust right there, right? Asexual people can absolutely have romantic relationships. They just don't tend to really experience sexual attraction in the same way that others may. So, this is a great example of really how sexuality is like diverse. It's pretty highly personal, and what feels true for one person may not feel true for someone else. Um, all right, so here's when things get interesting. So, beyond those familiar terms, I also want to touch base on demisexuals. These are people who only feel sexual attraction after forming a deep emotional connection. So, for demisexuals or someone who is demisexual, physical attraction does not come first, right? It's actually going to be the emotional bond that will pave the way for sexual attraction. And I love it because it really challenges the idea that sexual attraction is like immediate or instantaneous. But this tells us that there's other ways to experience desire beyond like the typical spark or chemistry that we often like see in the movies and TV shows, right? All right, next up. Pansexuality. The best way I've heard pansexuality described is being attracted to people regardless of gender. Um, so it's being attracted to the person itself, regardless of how they identified. It's not about being attracted to a specific gender or group of genders, right? So the term pansexual comes from the Greek prefix pan, which means all. So pansexuality is about being open to relationships with people of all genders, and it's not really about seeing you know, the gender itself. It's about the person, you know. It's important to note that pansexuality does not mean someone's attracted to everyone. It just means that that person, gender doesn't define it on who they're attracted to. All right. Now, here's the thing about all of these identities. Sexuality is fluid. It is not static. So it's not something that can be mapped out with like a simple checklist. A person's experience of sexuality can actually change over time. Asexuality, bisexuality, pansexuality, they're not rigid categories. So they're simply ways of describing how someone experiences attraction at a particular point in their life. Some people may move between these identities. They can also find that like their sense of sexuality shifts as they grow and evolve. There's no right or wrong way to feel, and there's certainly no fixed way that anyone has to experience their sexual self. Um, so, what happens when we look at sexuality beyond just labels? What if we think about sexuality as a spectrum of experiences rather than trying to fit everything into boxes? When we stop focusing so much on like labeling everything, we can really start to see the richness and like the diversity of human experiences. We can see how personal and individual sexuality is, how it changes with time, relationships, or even with just our growth. So, when we give ourselves the permission to explore and express our sexuality in whatever way feels most authentic, we allow ourselves a level of freedom that can be just so incredibly empowering. All right, so like, why does this matter? Why am I talking about sexuality as a spectrum today? Truly because understanding sexuality is fluid and diverse. It means that we can like create this space where people don't feel forced to fit into like a predefined role as well as an expectation of with that role. It's really, I want to remove the shame from these conversations. I want to celebrate the fact that everyone experiences desire and attraction differently. And that's just what makes us human, right? So, it's like at the end of the day, it's sexuality isn't just like who we're attracted to. It's how we understand ourselves. It's how we relate to others, and it is how we live authentically in this world. So, whether you identify with a label or not, the most important thing is honoring your own truth. And I honor your truth. I respect your truth, and I hear your truth. And that is it, my friend, for today's episode of The Spectrum of Self. So if I've said anything that, resonated with you, I really hope it helps you on your own journey to understanding your own sexuality or others that you may love, that are in your circle and that um, however that might look for you. If you like this episode, please feel free to rate the show, subscribe. As always, share this with anybody who may need to hear it. And until next time, keep exploring, keep embracing, and remember, it's on a spectrum.